Ethan Miller was a calm, seasoned, middle-aged man who had spent over a decade building his family-style restaurant chain, Miller's Diner, with unwavering dedication and a heartfelt vision of creating a warm, welcoming space, just like a real home-cooked meal. He never forgot the feeling on the day he opened his very first location, a small renovated house lit by soft yellow lights, filled with lively conversations and the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. Ethan believed that as long as he upheld human values and poured genuine care into every dish, his model would continue to grow steadily. But then, things started to change. Over the past few months, Ethan began to sense that something wasn't right. Complaint emails from customers started to roll in more frequently. They complained about rude service, long wait times, and how the atmosphere inside had become cold and distant. Worse yet, reports from the HR department showed an alarming rise in employee turnover, a painful blow to Ethan, who had always considered his staff like family. Despite this, the regional managers kept assuring him that everything was fine. They sent back clean, well-organized reports, so perfect they felt fake. Ethan knew one thing for sure: numbers never tell the whole truth. Something was being hidden. Maybe it was indifference, maybe internal pressure, or worse, maybe a toxic culture had quietly taken root behind those kitchen doors. Ethan couldn't sit still any longer. He made a bold decision: to go undercover. Without revealing his identity, he left the corporate office behind. He traded his expensive suit for an old hoodie, faded jeans, and thick glasses that made him look more like an out-of-work laborer than the CEO of a 13-restaurant chain. All of it was for one purpose: to return to where it all began, not as a boss, but as a regular person, to listen, to observe, to feel the truth behind the smiles of his employees and the polished numbers in the reports. This time, Ethan wasn't just there for a meal. He was there to uncover what had really become of the dream he once believed in. Ethan chose a branch about a 2-hour drive from the headquarters, tucked away in a quiet little town where he was confident no one would recognize him. It was the perfect spot for his undercover mission. He wanted to see what really happened when the boss wasn't around, and he believed this far-flung location would reveal the unfiltered truth. When Ethan walked in around lunchtime, he blended seamlessly into the crowd of everyday customers. With his simple clothes, slightly messy hair, scruffy beard, and thick black-rimmed glasses, he looked like just another man trying to catch his breath in the chaos of life. No one paid him any attention. None of the staff recognized him. Exactly what he needed. A young waitress came over to greet him, wearing a name tag that read Emily. She offered a faint smile that couldn't quite mask the fatigue in her eyes. Her voice was soft and polite. "Hi, welcome. Please have a seat. What can I get you?" Ethan ordered a coffee and a burger, then sat quietly, observing. Emily moved like a clock running out of battery, still ticking, but slower and heavier with every minute. She took orders, delivered trays, wiped down tables, and apologized to customers for the delays. Beneath her professional manner, Ethan saw a woman pushing herself to the brink, holding everything together by sheer willpower. Not even 10 minutes later, a sharp voice came barking from the kitchen. "Emily, you're late again. What the hell is taking you so long?" The voice was loud and cutting, with no care that the dining room was full of customers. Ethan turned toward the kitchen and saw him. Gary, the lunch shift manager. Stocky build, angry eyes, grease-stained apron. Emily flinched. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the tray. She didn't respond, just quickened her pace, head lowered, avoiding everyone's gaze. But Ethan saw it. That flash of hurt swallowed down and buried beneath another silent act of endurance. The mood in the diner shifted. A few customers shook their heads. Someone sighed. A young couple whispered, "Poor girl. That manager's a jerk." Ethan heard every word, and he felt a fire rising in his chest. This was not the place he had dreamed of building. This was not the warm, respectful space he once believed in, where employees were treated with kindness and customers were served with heart. In that moment, Ethan knew he had made the right decision to come. But he also realized Watching was no longer enough. It was time to act. The burger sat unfinished. Ethan had lost all appetite. He reached for his coffee, but paused when he heard something, faint at first, coming from behind the kitchen door. It started as a quiet hiccup, then slowly turned into the sound of someone choking back sobs. He sat still, ears sharpened. It was Emily. Her voice was fragile, shattered. "I'm doing my best. I haven't taken a break since my shift started. I just want to do a good job, but I keep getting yelled at." Her voice cracked like a crumpled piece of paper, barely audible over the hiss of fryers and the clatter of plates. Then came Gary's voice, harsh, cold, threatening. "If you can't handle it, then get out. No one here has time to listen to your whining." Ethan stood up. His heart felt heavy. He moved quickly toward the kitchen, pushed the door open gently, and what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Emily stood alone in the cramped kitchen, hands trembling as she wiped away tears. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes swollen from holding back for too long. Gary loomed in front of her, arms crossed, face twisted in anger. Two other cooks nearby, one older, one middle-aged, kept their heads down, pretending to focus on their work. No one spoke. No one intervened. The air felt like lead. But suddenly, a voice broke the silence. And it wasn't Ethan's. "She's been working non-stop since morning. She hasn't even had a chance to drink a glass of water. She doesn't deserve to be treated like this." It was Tyler, a young cook, thin, quiet, but with sharp, clear eyes. He stood by the chopping board, still holding his knife, but his gaze was steady and locked onto Gary. No fear, no hesitation. Gary turned, face flushing with fury. "Tyler, mind your own business. This has nothing to do with you." But Tyler didn't back down. His voice was calm but firm. "It has everything to do with all of us, because this happens every single day." Ethan remained by the door, quietly observing. Every glance, every strained expression, every crack in the team he once called family. And in that moment, he knew silence was no longer an option. With steady steps, Ethan walked into the kitchen. His voice was calm, low, but unwavering. "What exactly is going on here?" No one responded. Emily shrank back slightly. Gary turned to Ethan, his tone sharp. "Who the hell are you to get involved in my business?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at Emily, still fighting back tears. Then at Tyler, the brave young man who dared to speak up. He gave him a slight nod, then turned back to Gary. "She needs a break. And you, well, it sounds like you need a reminder of what it means to be a real manager." Gary scowled, about to reply, but Ethan raised his hand, silencing him with a firm look. He was no longer a stranger, no longer an outsider. And in that thick, suffocating air, something began to shift. A spark had been lit, and the fire inside Ethan was about to burn brighter than ever before. The tension in the kitchen hung thick like a stretched wire, still taut after the brief confrontation. Gary backed off a few steps, clearly irritated, but said nothing more. Ethan remained calm, almost unnervingly so, as if he had faced far tougher situations than this one. He turned gently to Emily and said in a soft voice, "Take a few minutes outside. Drink some water. Breathe. You've been doing a great job." Emily froze, tears still brimming in her eyes. She looked at Ethan hesitantly, then gave a small nod and quietly walked out of the kitchen. Gary looked like he was about to object, but one sharp glance from Ethan was enough to stop him cold. Once Emily disappeared behind the door, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook and pen. As the staff returned to their tasks, he began writing, carefully, quietly, like a detective piecing together the truth. How Gary yelled at staff during peak hours. The anxious, exhausted look on Emily's face. The silence from the two other cooks. Tyler's courage, the only one who dared to speak up. And even the voice of a nearby customer saying, "Every time I come here, the wait is endless. Might be time to try a new place." Ethan wrote it all down. Every detail. The strained atmosphere, the way the staff and customers interacted, it wasn't just a bad day. It was a systemic problem. After forcing himself to finish his meal, Ethan stood, paid in cash, and left a generous tip for Emily, though she was still on break. Just before walking out the door, he pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Janet, it's me," he said, voice low but steady. As soon as the call connected, he continued. "I need you to send me all the HR records for Branch 7, employment history, performance evaluations, internal feedback, everything on current staff. I also want the resignation letters from the past 6 months." "I'll send everything by today," Janet replied promptly, used to his urgent tone. Ethan looked up at the small glass sign above the entrance. "Sunny Bite Diner, where everyone feels like family." He gave a slight smirk, but it wasn't a smile. If this was a family, then it was one in serious trouble. He stepped out into the fading afternoon sunlight, but inside him a storm had started to brew. And Ethan knew he would return, not as a customer this time, but as who he truly was, the CEO of it all. The next morning, Ethan returned to the small diner in that quiet little town. Wearing the same faded hoodie, thick-rimmed glasses, and relaxed gait of a regular customer, no one suspected that the man walking in was the very founder of the entire restaurant chain. The early morning air felt lighter. The diner wasn't too busy yet. Ethan sat at the same spot as yesterday, by the window, where sunlight filtered through the trees outside, casting a soft glow across the table. Just a few minutes later, Emily appeared. Still the same polite smile, still the tired eyes hidden under a light layer of makeup, but something about her seemed different today. She greeted him with a touch of caution, even anxiety. "Good morning. What can I get you today?" she asked, holding a tray with menus. Ethan smiled gently and shook his head. "Just a coffee will do. And, if you don't mind, may I ask you a few things?" Emily looked uncertain, caught off guard. Then she nodded slowly. "Sure, but I only have a few minutes. We're still short-staffed today." Ethan gave a small nod. "That's okay. I'm just curious. How long have you worked here?" The question made her pause for a second, then she replied, "About 8 months. I started last fall. It was okay at first, but the past few months, it's been rough." "Why?" Ethan tilted his head, his voice gentle. Emily glanced quickly toward the kitchen door, then let out a quiet sigh. "We're always short-staffed, always. Some days I work over 8 hours straight. No break, no time to eat, barely a second to sit. And the shift lead, well, he doesn't really care." Ethan nodded slowly, noticing how carefully she spoke. Honest, but still cautious, as if afraid someone might overhear. After a brief silence, he asked, "And what about Tyler?" "I saw he was the only one who spoke up yesterday." Emily's face softened. A rare, genuine smile surfaced. "Tyler? He's great. Only been here a few months, but he's always willing to help. If I'm not feeling well, he'll take tables for me. If the kitchen's falling apart, he jumps in without being asked. Honestly, if it weren't for Tyler, I probably would have quit already." Ethan saw it clearly in her eyes, that mix of exhaustion and gratitude. Tyler wasn't just a co-worker. He was the thread holding Emily, and maybe the whole team together. Before heading back to work, Emily bowed her head slightly. "I'm sorry. I have to get back. We're short again today." Ethan nodded, watching her small figure disappear behind the counter. His hand tightened around the notebook in his pocket. The pieces were coming together now. The understaffing, the overwhelming workload, the lack of support, the culture of silence, and a team on the edge, holding on day by day. But Ethan knew. Today, he wasn't just here to investigate. He was here to start making things right. By noon, the diner was bustling. The clinking of plates, the sound of orders being called out, and the steady murmur of conversations filled the air with energy. Ethan sat quietly in his usual spot, observing everything. Emily moved from table to table without rest, her face showing fatigue, yet she held on to a polite smile. Everything seemed to be running normally, until an older man sitting by the window furrowed his brows and waved for attention. "Miss, my eggs are overcooked. Look at this. Don't you even know how to cook eggs?" he snapped. Emily lowered her head slightly, keeping her tone calm and respectful. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience, sir. I'll have the kitchen remake it right away." She was just about to take the plate back when Gary, the shift manager, stormed out of the kitchen, his face twisted with frustration. "Again, Emily. How many times do I have to tell you? Check the food before it leaves the kitchen. Such a simple mistake, and you still mess it up." He barked at her, jabbing his finger in the air, his voice rising above the entire room. The whole diner fell silent. Emily froze, her face drained of color from embarrassment. Nearby customers turned to look. A few shook their heads in disapproval. Ethan clenched his fists. He had seen enough. He stood up and walked steadily toward them. The look in his eyes was no longer that of a quiet customer. It was the look of a man who had built this place with everything he had. From his jacket, Ethan pulled out his wallet and quietly revealed an ID card, clear and unmistakable. Ethan Miller, CEO and founder. His voice was calm, but it carried through the room. "That's enough. I will not tolerate how you treat staff, especially in front of customers, at a diner that bears my name." Gary froze. His eyes widened in disbelief. The other staff in the diner stopped what they were doing. All eyes turned toward Ethan. You're? Gary stammered. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I'm Ethan Miller. I own this entire restaurant chain, and I've just seen enough to make a decision." Gary's face went from red to pale in an instant. He scrambled for an excuse. "I was just keeping the shift under control." Ethan raised a hand, silencing him with one firm motion. "No one has the right to humiliate others, and no one is allowed to turn this workplace into something this toxic." He turned to Emily, his voice softening. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded slightly, eyes red. "Take a break. I'll handle things from here." Then Ethan turned back to Gary, his tone colder than steel. My office. Now." In the small room behind the kitchen, the door clicked shut quietly, but the tension inside was unmistakable. Ethan sat across from Gary, his face unreadable. "Do you know what you did wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice low but commanding. Gary avoided eye contact. "I was just trying to make sure everyone stayed on task." Ethan cut him off, his tone sharper now. "And you think that justifies yelling at staff, humiliating them in front of customers, letting them burn out without breaks?" He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he spoke slowly and clearly, each word deliberate. "You are officially terminated, effective immediately. I'll have HR handle the paperwork." Gary's face went pale. "No, please. I need this job." Ethan looked him dead in the eyes, unwavering. "We need people who are capable and who respect others. You are no longer a fit for this company." Gary stood still for a moment, then quietly turned and walked out, knowing there was nothing more to say. As the last customers filtered out and the lights dimmed across the diner, Ethan gently invited Emily and Tyler to sit at a table near the corner. They still looked stunned by everything that had happened, faces mixed with fatigue, uncertainty, and a flicker of hope. Ethan leaned forward, resting his hands on the table, and looked at them with quiet sincerity. "First of all," he began, "I want to apologize to both of you for letting things get this bad." Emily and Tyler exchanged a glance, unsure what to say. "I built this chain from the ground up," Ethan continued, his voice steady, tinged with regret. "But over the years, I've become disconnected from reality. I relied on reports and polished evaluations from upper management without seeing the real people who've been carrying this place on their backs. And that's you two." Emily lowered her gaze. Tyler nodded slightly, visibly moved. "I saw everything today," Ethan went on, "and I didn't just see the problems. I saw your worth." He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and opened it. "I have some proposals, and I'm not just talking." He turned to the young cook beside him. Tyler, he said, you were the only one who had the courage to speak up for your co-worker when it counted. You work hard, you step in without being asked, and you've shown me the spirit this company needs. So starting tomorrow, I'd like you to take on the role of assistant manager, with a higher salary and a more stable work schedule. You have real potential, and I want to invest in that. Tyler's eyes widened. He almost couldn't believe it. I... Really? But I've never been a manager. Ethan smiled gently. You've already been one. Every day. You just didn't have the title. Now you do. He turned to Emily, his tone softening. Emily, I know you've been here for 8 months without a single complaint. Even when you're exhausted, you treat customers with grace, look out for your teammates, and never let your kindness slip. I saw how you handled that difficult customer. I saw you give crayons to a crying child. I saw the grateful looks from those you helped, and that deserves recognition. His voice was calm but resolute. Starting next week, I'm significantly raising your pay and including you in a new performance-based bonus program, so every ounce of effort you put in gets the reward it deserves. Emily raised her hand to her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. I don't know what to say. I thought I was just doing my job. You've been doing far more than that, Ethan replied warmly. And finally, I'm going to overhaul the shift schedules, hire more staff, upgrade the equipment, and, most importantly, rebuild a culture rooted in kindness, teamwork, and mutual respect. For a moment, Emily and Tyler sat in silence. The weight on their shoulders seemed to lift, if only slightly. Ethan leaned back and closed with quiet strength. I can't promise to fix everything overnight, but I promise you this. Starting today, you're no longer alone. In the weeks that followed, the diner, once weighed down like a place stuck in a long winter, began to bloom with the signs of early spring. Ethan didn't return to the corporate office right away. Instead, he stayed. He rolled up his sleeves and worked shoulder to shoulder with the team, in the kitchen, at the counter, wiping tables, cleaning floors. Few could have imagined that the once-suited CEO would be the one mopping up spills, but Ethan didn't just give orders. He listened. He observed. He learned the rhythm of the place, and in that process, he discovered something crucial. Real change doesn't come from flashy speeches. It comes from showing up, day after day, with sincerity and steady action. After a careful hiring process, Ethan brought in a new manager, Denise, a woman with years of experience in high-pressure environments, known for leading teams with quiet strength and soft discipline. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her calm tone and firm gaze earned respect naturally. People followed not out of fear, but out of trust. Little by little, the atmosphere at the diner transformed. Smiles returned to the staff's faces. Laughter echoed across the dining room. Even customers who had once walked away in frustration began to return, not just for the food, but for the warmth and sense of belonging that now filled the space. Tyler, now assistant manager, carried himself with new confidence. He listened to his co-workers, handled issues with calm, and never hesitated to get his hands dirty. Emily, too, seemed to shine, her hair neatly tied back, her steps light and quick across the floor, but most importantly, her smile no longer felt forced. One quiet weekend afternoon, as the lunch rush began to slow, Ethan happened to walk past the counter and saw Emily making coffee for a regular customer. She looked up and met his eyes. Her smile was gentle, her gaze warm. "Thank you," she said softly. "This place, it really means something now." Ethan paused for a moment, not needing to say a word, because in that brief moment he knew he had done the right thing, not just for a diner, but for the people who gave it life. That afternoon, as the golden light of sunset streamed through the diner's windows, Ethan stood outside, a warm cup of coffee in hand, quietly watching the simple but meaningful scenes unfolding inside. Emily was laughing with a customer. Tyler was straightening the chairs with care, and Denise was calmly jotting down feedback from a young mother visiting for the first time. There were no harsh words, no weary glances, no murmurs of disappointment like before. Instead, there was kindness. There was joy in the work. There was connection, human connection, something Ethan once thought he understood but nearly lost sight of. And in that quiet moment, he came to a powerful realization. A company isn't the numbers on a spreadsheet. It isn't quarterly earnings or year-end profits. It's people. It's the heartbeat behind every shift, every customer smile, every drop of sweat from the staff. Without Emily, without Tyler, without the silent strength of those who endured and kept going every single day, this place wouldn't be a beloved diner. And if a CEO like him couldn't listen, couldn't truly see that, then he'd be leading nothing more than an empty shell, polished on the outside, hollow within. Ethan took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt like he was leading the right way, not through authority, but through presence and through heart. And in that moment, he made himself a promise. He would never forget that again.